Well, this Thanksgiving, I do have an extra something to be grateful for. As some or possibly many of you know, on Monday evening, September 28th, I was able to harvest a bull moose with my bow and arrow. Another difficult accomplishment, but we got her done, and now we have a bit of healthy and delicious meat in the family freezer. Well, as I've related many times before, my journey with archery and with bow hunting has been a place that the Lord has been using to speak to me. You know, God seems to delight in being near us in all things, not just in the seemingly spiritual things like when we're at church or whatnot, but God delights in us in all things that we do. When you ride your motorcycle, I think it gives God pleasure. I heard an amen. You know, God delights being near us in all things, and He uses all of those things for His good, for His glory, and ways to express His love and His goodness towards us. So even in these most unsuspecting places, God can meet us and help us to grow and mature in ways that will cause life and joy to spill into everything that we do. Now, for me, the journey with archery and with bow hunting has been just as much spiritual as it has been practical. I've really met the Lord in this place. God's been using it like a classroom to illustrate some spiritual lessons. So, well, this is a way that God can speak to me in my own language. I believe that the lessons that I learn and the words that God speaks are also meant for the corporate body here. God has me in the classroom for a greater purpose than just myself. So as you may remember, a few messages ago, I delivered one in 2016 after a much defeat, and then one in 2018 after a surprising success. The first part of my journey learning to bow hunt moose, the Lord used that time to teach me about perseverance. And during that time, He led me to meditate on all sorts of scriptures about that. There's actually 45 different passages that I could find exhorting the church to persevere, like such an important message. And some of the ones that I was really meditating on that we went through as a corporate body, like Philippians 3, Hebrews 12, James 5, we dove deep into this. So that 3-year lesson that ended for me in 2018, I had to learn it the long and the hard way, but it ended up becoming a multi-year word for our church and how God was calling us to persevere through all sorts of changes and transitions, things that were maybe difficult for us, and other things that were actually just going good, but it was His encouragement to keep going. Well, the journey continues. These past 2 years, 2019 and 2020, I was back at it again. I don't know. I persevered with it and back at it again. But this time, as I got back in the field, back in the bush, the lesson that I was being taught by the Lord was something different, even though I was doing the same activity. What had worked before was no longer working. What had worked before was no longer working. I could not rely upon my past success to keep carrying me through. I had to learn something new. I had to grow. Because what I had found success in, when I kept doing it, all of a sudden it stopped working. Previously, I'd used what we call spot and stalk techniques with my bow hunting, where you actively seek and then you follow the animals and you try to close the distance into a very, very tight bow range. And I'd chosen actually to follow that towards the end of my last run, where I found some success because I was given some ancestral wisdom from Carol via her grandfather. He said her grandfather just said, "Follow the tracks." Such simple wisdom, but it's just like, I'll do that. And guess what? It worked. But I kept doing that, and In 2019, I had a few close calls, but got no bull. And then 2020, I started similarly to do that same thing until there was a little nudge in my spirit where I knew that the Lord was trying to teach me something. A little still small voice, so to speak, to change my approach. Because what had worked before was no longer working. I could not rely upon past success. I had to learn something new. I had to grow. So similar to before, where I would stalk into the bush and look for signs where moose were traveling, I would do that. But instead of chasing and striving after the goal, I was being led to do something different. And the instruction was this: sit, wait, be patient, but an active patience. An act of waiting, an act of watching. But sit, wait. And also led to just, while you're there, call out. Do my moose calls. Call out more than I ever had before. And I kind of didn't want to do that because before I didn't always have the greatest success. A little bit, but not much. Because those moose are pretty educated with a bunch of other hunters trying to call them out. But that was the instruction. Sit, wait. Be still. Now, as a person of action in mind and body, being still it's not my preference and it's not my strength. I have a very active mind. I mean, you can ask my wife and my kids. I'm always reading. I'm always researching something. My mind is always going 100 miles an hour. I just love to think and to process and to learn. And same with my physical body, even though it doesn't always quite look like it. I do like to be active, and I like to hike for miles and miles and just see the beauty of God's creation and whatnot. So this was quite the challenge for me. And then to add to this, I mean, I was feeling concerned over needing to harvest a moose to feed my family. As all of you have probably noticed, the cost of everything is going way, way up. Everything is costing more, is more expensive. And so the felt need or even the pressure for me to secure some provision, it felt heightened just because of those things. So there was more going on inside of my heart. And of course, to top it all off, the past 7 months of this COVID season has been quite unsettling for all of us, on many different levels, with just some of the uncertainty and the insecurity of what the days may bring and what's the new regulation or restriction or just some of the isolation and some of the restrictions and their resulting effects, just some of the loneliness we feel, or just the weariness, the fatigue that many people are feeling. I mean, we're all kind of in this spot, and I'm there too. So I'm kind of feeling all this. I identify with that feeling internally unsettled. Does anybody else identify with that, just feeling a little unsettled through this season? Yeah. And I was there. So as it is in life, so it is in bow hunting. That's not the kind of space that precipitates the best decisions. So God is having me learn something. Out in the field, I felt the Lord direct me to set up my little tripod stool. It's just this little fold-up stool you can put in your backpack. Set up my stool and just sit in a good spot. Just sit and be still. Now, the first couple of days I did this, I saw some, modest action in the bush. I saw a cow moose the first time walk by, and that's always neat to see a big animal like that, walking in front of you. And then, next time, nothing but just some distant movement that I could hear but not so much see in the bush. So there's a little something there, but it was like, you know what? I'm going to be obedient to that still small voice, which I think might be the Lord here. So that's what I kept doing for, the next time. I sat still. But as I continued to sit still, I actually became really still. Not just physically still, but I became still my heart. Now, while it may sound somewhat cliche, a very familiar verse came to my mind through this time, upon which I began to meditate, which is Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. This simple exhortation beautifully and succinctly sums up the heart posture of many biblical images and stories. One of my favorite scholars, John Walton, he calls this whole psalm a psalm of trust in the face of this overwhelming feeling of threat. The words of the psalm, they're speaking prophetically into all of the raging that are surrounding the people, the raging of the surrounding nations. If we look at Psalm 46, verse 2 and 3, speak of the roaring, foaming waters of the sea, which is an image to talk about the chaos that is just surrounding and enveloping and overwhelming the people. The words, be still, they are a call from the warrior God, a challenge both to the faithful and to the foes to stop your fighting. Whatever you're battling, stop your fighting and pay attention. Be still. Stop your fighting. Pay attention. The psalm is written in a context of conflict and of war. Stop your fighting. In the original Hebrew, be still means more literally to stop what you have been doing. In other words, implying that there's another way going to come forward here. Only when we cease our own frantic activity can we then begin to experience God's acting for us. Only then, the psalmist says, can we know that he is God. Only when we cease our frantic activity can we begin to experience God's acting for us. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Stop what you've been doing. Stop your fighting and pay attention. In asking God how this passage could apply for us today, I believe he gave the following insight and direction. And it is this: give up your attempt to control the situation. Give up that fighting, so to speak. This doesn't mean becoming inactive, but it does mean that we release our grip. Be still. Stop what you've been doing. Stop your fighting. Give up your attempt to control the situation. And similarly, give up the things that have control over me. We release things to which we've submitted or given allegiance, which are keeping us in the conflict, which are keeping us stirring inside. The fear, the anxiety, maybe there's some expectations or some aspirations or some ambitions, something in here that has a grip that's clenching on our hearts. We release those things. For me, out in the field, it was that sense of expectation and need, like, I got to get this done. I got to put some meat in the freezer. And that thing was, it had gripped my heart, and it was driving me. But the thing was, give up the control, let go of this, and that thing that is controlling you, let it go. And I believe that's a word for us today. Be still, let it go. That need to control, or that need to submit to those things that are controlling us. Both of these things require humility to recognize, to acknowledge, and to admit where we have been controlling or where we have submitted to some sort of control, something that has gripped our hearts. We see in verse 9 of Psalm 46, God's ultimate intention is that wars cease. In context, I mean, he's really talking about physical battles between warring tribes and nations here. But God's ultimate intentions is that wars cease, whatever that war is around us. And we see that manifest different ways throughout the scriptural record. God is looking for the war to cease, including the one in here and the one in here. God's intention is that all the chaos will be transformed into life-giving order. We see the raging sea becomes the peaceful river of God, which makes glad the city of God. If we look at verses 3 and 4 of that psalm. Be still so that we can begin to experience God acting for us. Be still and know. As we enter into a quietness, we enter the position where we can then hear and then also receive. We can receive revelation. When we're still, then we can finally know. I mean, I hear so many people comment right now that, there's just so much information out there right now and so much coming at us, and it can be difficult even just to discern, like, what's reliable, what's true, like, how can we know anything that's going on right now? And this adds to this unsettled feeling, which kind of fuels our desire to fight our way out or to kind of get some things under control. When we're still before God, we can know something that is reliable and something that is true and something that we can anchor upon, which is something that we all need and are even looking for today. When we're still before God, we can know something reliable and true. And it's a knowing that goes just beyond information. It's a confidence deep in our spirit. It's an intimate knowledge that you can only get by interaction with a friend. Be still and know that I am God. Also from Psalm 46. Know, be still and know that He is our refuge. Know that He is our strength. Know that He is our fortress. Know that He is our ever-present help in trouble. Acknowledging that God is and who He is, it changes our perspective on everything. Especially in those times when we need to be still and recognize that He is God and I am not. This changes our perspective on everything. It changes our heart. It changes how we walk it out. And it changes the kind of fruit that we will bear. Well, that Monday evening on September 28th on my hunt, I again listened to that prompting in my spirit. I was still in body and in heart. I remember that Monday morning and afternoon I was kind of fighting. It's like, do I go out? Do I not go out? And I was kind of tossing it around with my family, and they're like, whatever. And it's like, you know what? I just felt something. It's like, I'm going to go. So I did. And as I was driving out there on the highway, I just let His presence soak in and permeate my being. I was even still before I was in the field. Like something started even on my drive out, and I felt a certain sense of expectation and the presence of God there. And this was like, I kind of had the thought going through, maybe today's the day, but But there was just something about the presence of God that was there with me that kind of took my notice that I hadn't before when I went out in the field. And then when I finally hiked around and found the spot where I was going to wait and see if I could have a moose walk by, and sat down on my little tripod seat, then it really took a hold of me. That stillness, where I was okay. Normally I'm a little bit more anxious and I want to go checking out over here, over there, and go looking around, but it was good. I was still. And that stillness of knowing his presence and his goodness, it turned into a time of thanksgiving when even when the fields were empty in front of me and the bushes were quiet and I wasn't seeing anything really much go on, I just had that confidence that somehow, even if not in this way, even if I don't get meat in the freezer by putting a moose in there, I had this confidence that God would provide good food for our family. As I was still and I just knew he is God, whether it's this way or that way, he is a good God and he will provide. And I was able to set aside my anxieties and my expectations. And then sunset came. It's like, oh, well, I thought, I kind of had a good feeling about today, but it's like sunset's starting to get dark. Maybe not the day. But even then, I just felt the Lord just giving me the grace to just let go of it and just to feel good and give thanks for the day. That I'm in a beautiful place and I'm watching the colors of the sunset go. And I just remained to be. And then from the most unexpected place, God seems to do that to me all the time. Everywhere that I expect, it doesn't happen there. I was set up on a crosswise trail where the moose should have come from either north to south or south to north, but most likely from the west heading east straight towards me. There was a little trail from behind me, but the wind was blowing that way, and that would have been downwind, so there's no way. I mean, moose have like a big 9-inch, 12-inch nose, There's no way that this thing would come from downwind, so I kind of set up there. But then from the most unexpected place, step, step, step. And then I start hearing these grunts. Oh, oh. This bull is looking for the cow call that I gave out like 20 minutes ago. And then a very close encounter happened because the trail that I thought he would never come on was actually really close to me because I was just in the bush in just kind of a natural spot where there's a little break in the bushes here and here where I could actually pull off a shot. And this moose walks by and he's about 6 feet from me as he breaks the bush behind me and he comes into a little clearing. And I look at him and he looks at me from 6 feet away. And if you see this guy, if you saw the picture of him, the front tines on his guard tines, they call them, are very long and very sharp. This thing has spears on his head, like he is a fighter. It's like, okay, this isn't good. And here he is 6 feet away from me, and he's like, you're not a cow. It's like, no, I am not. I already have my bow drawn, but it's drawn in the wrong direction because there's bush there. I just see his head. And even in that moment, normally something in me would have gone, oh crap, this is not good to be close to, because bull moose, when they're in the rut, they can be extremely aggressive. I've been charged a few times, so is my brother-in-law. It's not good. And at that distance, there's nothing I could do. Like, it would be over. But even in that moment, I just felt the stillness of God over me. Be still and know that I am God. Practicing that stillness. In the moment, I was still. And then my little moose takes 4 little steps into the lane and arrow through the heart, and he's down in 12 seconds, and that was it. So from that unexpected place, provision did come, but it did not come from my striving. It did not come from my chasing it down. It came from being still and being able to receive it. I wasn't inactive. I did a lot of hiking. I did a lot of work still, but it came from a very different place. And so what I received that day was more than delicious meat. I received through this process with the Lord in the field, I received peace. I received his comfort. I received a change in perspective that I needed. I received strength that I didn't have on my own. I received a renewed trust, even when it looked like everything was going the wrong way. I received hope. This stillness and knowing, it becomes an act of worship and thanksgiving. In it, we regain a truthful view of the ultimate reality of our God of hope. I want to close with Psalm 100 as we tie in this word about being still with our moment of thanksgiving right now. Psalm 100 reads, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name forever. For the Lord is good and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." Through the years, we have taken these scriptures seriously as a church body. And we've started off many, or ended off many different meeting times together with sharing words of thanksgiving, where we know and we acknowledge that he is God and that he is good. And every time we've done that, every single time, it significantly changes the atmosphere in the room. We become filled with light, with hope, with joy. And for all of us, it reorients our hearts, our expectations, our faith, and we receive the necessary course correction. Through giving thanks, we're invited to be still to the presence of God in the room. And then we open our hearts to be able to receive and to host that presence and to know he is God. He is here. He is near. He is good. And once again, when we do this, we relearn this biblical fact that in the presence of God, anything becomes possible. Anything becomes possible in the presence of God. It's not so much the room that changes. We change. We become aware of his presence and aware that anything becomes possible. Even when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we can fear no evil. Why? Because he's with us. And when he is with us, anything becomes possible. Because he is the God who raises the dead. So as we end our time this morning, for those of us who are here in person and for those of us who are on Zoom, what we're going to do is we're going to enter into a prayer time where we begin by gathering in groups or in breakout rooms, and we are going to start with thanksgiving, taking that moment to be still, to know that he is God, and then to acknowledge his goodness in our lives. So I encourage everyone here and there and everywhere. Let's break out now into some prayer groups, and let's spend some time in here. I'm thinking groups of at least 5 if we can, because the more Thanksgiving that we can hear, the better. So, and same with our breakout rooms. I hope that doesn't screw you up too much, Taylor, but if we can get breakout rooms that are slightly larger with 4 or 5 families, that would be great. But let's start our prayers by opening up thanksgiving and opening our hearts to be still before the Lord. And then let's see what happens. See what happens when we invite the presence of God into the room, when we invite the presence of God into our breakout rooms, and then begin to pray as the Spirit leads from that place of knowing that He is God, and He is good, and He is here, and anything can happen.